You don't want justice, you want executioners. Jasmine Crockett thundered across Congress, shredding J.D. Vance's tough guy facade in front of millions. Shocking photos exposed the truth. National Guardsmen sweeping trash in D.C. paraded as proof of a fake war on crime. Then came the numbers: 95% of those arrested in his so-called Midway Blitz were innocent workers, not violent criminals. The chamber shook with fury, disbelief, and raw tension as Crockett demanded answers. If this is what power calls justice, what will it call freedom tomorrow? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. Dawn in Washington bleeds through a gray sky as sirens whine like nerves on edge, and the first shot crashes in. National Guard uniforms, not bristling with rifles, but pushing brooms, scooping black bags, trimming hedges under the capitals. Marble glare, drone cams skim low over wet asphalt, catching the neon smear of patrol lights reflected in puddles. A boom of headlines slams the screen, one after another. Every city, until the words feel less like a question and more like a threat. On sidewalk corners, tourists lift their phones and whisper that it looks like order, while a janitor pauses, frowns, and mutters that order shouldn't look this stage. Inside living rooms from Milwaukee to Detroit, the morning news loops the same strange tableau: soldiers as street crews while a crawl promises a prime-time hearing today that will clarify the mission. Cut to a steel-blue corridor behind the committee chamber, where staffers whisper, cameras blink to life, and a makeup brush taps the last shine from a senator's forehead. J.D. Vance stands in a pocket of shadow, like a man rehearsing victory. Lines, spine ramrod straight, hands clasped with the casual menace of someone who expects history to arrive on cue. A producer raises fingers: 3, 2, 1, and a boom mic drifts above him as he nods to aides, then steps toward the light. His voice lands with the thud of policy dressed as prophecy. Law of war for America's streets. The phrase ricochets off marble, through earbuds, into the bloodstream of a nation that knows the taste of fear and the price of words. Doors open, cameras tilt, the room inhales and holds it. And then she enters, Jasmine Crockett, cutting through the hum like a blade through fabric, suit the color of thundercloud steel, eyes steady as a surgeon's hand. In the crook of her arm is a binder thick enough to anchor a ship, its tabs like little flags of intent. Through a translucent sleeve flashes a still photo of a guardsman stooping to pick up a soda can beneath a banner that reads security initiative. She passes a veteran with desert sand still lodged somewhere behind his eyes. He nods once, not at a politician, but at a fellow combatant in a different kind of war. A mother sits clutching paperwork as if clutching oxygen, whips moving around the names of her children, a prayer disguised as a list. Jasmine slows, just enough to let their faces etch into her, to trade the sterile air of power for the warm ache of consequence. Disbelief flickers across her features at the theater of it, at the soldiers with yard tools, at the arrogance of that line, and then the flicker hardens, focusing into something colder, brighter, more durable than fury. Purpose. The chair's gavel cracks like a starter pistol and the spectacle jumps to speed. Photos armed like bullets, talking points drawn like maps, the nation's pulse ticking on the chyron at the bottom of every screen. Vance lifts his chin. Already selling expansion, a franchise model for Forscopy the capital, ship it nationwide, badge it as salvation and bill it as strength. Staffers shuffle new printouts to his elbow. A friendly whisper says the Poland loves decisive, and the word decisive blooms in the air like tear gas you can't quite see. Jasmine's knuckles brush the edge of the mic, and there is a quiet that feels like tide before it breaks. She does not clear her throat. She does not smile. She lets the camera climb to her face and stay there, the nation carried toward her on a red light the size of a dime, and she stacks her words so they won't collapse under the weight of what's coming. If justice suffocates, democracy will die. The sentence hangs, luminous and heavy at once, and in living rooms and union halls and squad cars idling at dawn, people who have never met her feel something unclench and then lock into place. Do you believe safety comes from more force or more justice? The chamber is not a room, it is an arena dressed in marble, a coliseum built for a different kind of blood sport. Light knifes down from the skylight, turning every polished surface into a blade, and rows of press cameras stare like predators in the rafters, waiting for the first drop of weakness. Spectators pack the benches shoulder to shoulder, the buzz of whispers building into a kind of static that tightens the air. Every cough, Every shuffle of paper, every flick of a pen sounds amplify, as if the walls themselves are leaning in to listen. On one side sits Matt Geets, the provocateur, lips curled in a smirk that looks rehearsed, ready to throw gasoline on sparks the moment they catch. He leans forward like a man watching a circus he secretly owns, thumbs tapping on his phone as though even this spectacle is just another clip for social media. Behind him, a war veteran in a faded suit shifts uncomfortably, his eyes carrying the sand and smoke of Baghdad. His silence heavier than any speech. When his hands clench on the wooden rail, the veins on his knuckles stand out like rope, and the weight of memory thickens the air around him. To rows down, an immigrant mother sits with a folder clutched to her chest, its corners frayed from nights of being pressed under her pillow like a talisman. Her child's crayon drawing peeks out from the paper stick figures holding hands, a small house, the sun scribbled in wild yellow. Her eyes, red-rimmed but unblinking, dart from Geets to Vance to Jasmine, as if trying to read the outcome. Before the fight even begins, she knows every word uttered here could decide whether she goes home tonight to tuck her child in or vanish into the machinery of raids dressed up as justice. By the witness table sits the Chicago police chief, uniform immaculate but jaw-tight, the kind of man who knows the sound of sirens is not just policy, but a nightly soundtrack. His presence is an anchor, a reminder that rhetoric echoes differently when it hits the asphalt, when officers must answer calls in neighborhoods already bruised by distrust. He does not lean back, he does not relax, he stares ahead as though bracing for impact, because he knows promises made in marble often crack. When they hit concrete. Then comes J.D. Vance's voice, measured, icy, every syllable sharpened for soundbite glory. American need strength, he declares, his gaze slicing from senator to camera as though he's addressing not colleagues, but history itself. He calls the crackdown a template, a model of decisive order to be replicated across the nation. His words drop heavy, crafted to sound like solutions, but tasting like threats, and with every phrase, the room tightens. Applause does not follow, only silence, taut and uneasy, as if even the air is reluctant to endorse him. At the far end of the dais, Jasmine Crockett does not move. She sits still as stone, eyes lowered to the binder in front of her, hands resting lightly on the table, as if conserving fire for the right moment. Each page beneath her fingers holds evidence, numbers, affidavits, photographs, the kind of truth that doesn't whisper, it detonates when released. She breathes slow, measured, a fighter pacing herself. Before the bell, fury caged not to be suppressed but to be aimed. The cameras know it, the spectators feel it. The entire chamber waits, like a drumroll stretched along, for the collision everyone senses is coming, and as Vance leans back, satisfied with his opening salvo, Jasmine lifts her eyes calm, unblinking, razor bright. The silence after his speech is no accident. It is her first weapon, for in that pause hangs a single question heavy as a verdict. If you sat in that chamber, whose voice would you trust, the one that brandishes fear, or the one that bleeds truth? The screen behind Jasmine flares to life without warning, the sudden glow pulling every pair of eyes to the towering projection. Grainy but unmistakable, National Guardsmen in camouflage, heads bent, plastic bags in hand, dragging them down the littered sidewalks of D.C. Another shot, soldiers trimming hedges in Lafayette Square. Another picking up empty soda cans under a banner marked Security Initiative. The silence breaks into a ripple of gasps, a hiss of disbelief rising from the gallery. It is not war footage, not images of heroism under fire, but a pantomime of order staged for cameras. A woman in the back row covers her mouth. The veteran's jaw tightens. Even the Chicago police chief shakes his head almost imperceptibly. Jasmine leans into the mic, her voice smooth, a tone like steel dragged across flint. This is your war, Mr. Vance. Soldiers with trash bags, paid with taxpayer dollars, repackaged as warriors of justice. The words land like a gavel strike, each syllable cracking through the marble hush. Cameras zoom on Vance, catching the flicker of unease before it folds into a practiced smirk. He exhales sharply, shoulders rising, in a show of disdain, and replies with a line he must have rehearsed a dozen times. Clean streets are results. The answer should land with weight, but instead it drops like a stone into an empty well. The chamber bristles, murmurs rise like wine before a storm. Jasmine doesn't flinch. She points to the image still frozen on screen. 3 guardsmen, stooped in fluorescent light, one holding a broom like a prop. Her voice sharpens, the edge now unmistakable. This is not war, this is theater with soldiers as janitors. And you dare call this victory? The words detonate, and the sound that follows is not applause, but the kind of collective intake of breath that only comes when a truth has been spoken too plainly to ignore. The veteran lets out a low grunt of agreement. The immigrant mother shakes her head in disbelief. Vance straightens in his chair, the smirk faltering, his tongue pressing against his teeth as if searching for a retort that refuses to arrive. The seconds start to stretch, 10, 15, 20. His eyes dart briefly to Geets, who leans forward with a smirk of his own but offers no lifeline. The cameras keep counting what the nation cannot look away from. Silence. Not just hesitation but paralysis. 30 seconds, 35. A bead of sweat traces a line down Vance's temple. 40. Reporters' pen stop mid-sentence, waiting. 45. The weight of the moment suffocates the room, each tick of the clock carving deeper into the facade of strength he'd tried to sell. By 47 seconds, the pause is no longer silence, it is exposure. Jasmine does not break eye contact, her calm expression daring him to recover, to spin, to fight back, but he cannot. And into that cavern of wordlessness she lowers her voice, the kind of tone that chills because it carries no need to shout. If this is your definition of victory, then America is losing far more than streets. What would you ask J.D. Vance in that moment of silence when power's voice collapses under the weight of its own lie? The footage fades, but the tension in the chamber clings like smoke. J.D. Vance clears his throat, seizing the pause to reset the stage. His tone is deliberate, pitched low and steady, as though gravity itself should lend his words authority. Chicago is the proof, he declares, voice echoing against marble. Operation Midway Blitz has shown America what happens when weak leadership is replaced with decisive federal control. We are not hunting families, we are targeting illegal criminals who have infested our cities. He lets the phrase hang, savoring it, as if repetition might transmute rhetoric into truth. The cameras catch Geets nodding in satisfaction, lips curved into that familiar smirk of provocation, but Jasmine is ready. She doesn't flinch at the thunder of his words. Instead, she flips open her binder with a snap that cuts sharper than his declaration, pages fanned out like weapons, each tap a blade. She pulls one sheet free, holds it up so the cameras can capture the black ink against white paper. The FBI's own data, she says, her voice slicing through the chamber. 95%, let me repeat that, 95% of those seized in Midway Blitz had no record of violent crime. They were workers, laborers, men and women whose only offense was existing in the shadows you choose to spotlight. The numbers land like shrapnel, impossible to ignore. A gasp breaks from the gallery, louder than the hush that preceded it. The police chief lowers his eyes, jaw clenched, as though acknowledging what every beat cop in his city already knows. The veteran shakes his head slowly, the weight of service pressing heavy on his shoulders. Geets shifts in his seat, frown lines creasing, but it is Vance who tightens his grip on the table, knuckles paling as though he might crush wood with bare hands. Still he says nothing. The silence is broken by the voice of the immigrant mother. Fragile but unwavering, it drifts from the witness row like a prayer that refuses to stay buried. They came at night, she begins, each word trembling yet steady. My little boy screamed when they took his father. He was 5 years old, holding onto his leg, crying, begging. And they pulled him away like garbage. Her hand clutches, the crayon drawing peeking from her folder, her body trembling as though the memory is tearing through her all over again. Tell me, sir, is my son a criminal? The room falls to stillness so complete that even the air seems to hold its breath. Jasmine leans forward, voice low, carrying a power born not of volume but of conviction. Fear, she says, her eyes locked on Vance, does not equal safety. Fear shreds trust, tears families apart, and turns children into collateral. If this is your victory, then you are not protecting America, you are betraying it. And in that moment, every camera lens captures the truth written across his silence. Do you think numbers tell the truth or hide it? The mother's words still tremble in the air, and Matt Geets lunges forward, unable to stomach the silence suffocating his ally. He slams his palm flat against the table, his voice cutting through the chamber like a heckler in the middle of a funeral. This is common sense policing. He sneers, dragging out the phrase as though it alone should erase the testimony of a weeping mother. His words rattle the room, crude, dismissive, calculated to disrupt the rhythm Jasmine has seized. He leans back with a grin, smug and sure that soundbite aggression will drown the moral weight pressing down on Vance. Jasmine does not blink. She swivels slowly, her gaze narrowing on Geets with the precision of a predator measuring the weakness in its prey. When she speaks, her tone is not raised but sharpened, each syllable honed to puncture through the performance. Common sense, she repeats, letting the words drip with scorn, is not handcuffs before truth. It is not tearing fathers from children in the dead of night. It is not soldiers with brooms pretending to fight crime while families are broken like glass. Her voice hardens, striking like steel on stone. Your version of common sense is nothing but cruelty dressed up in a soundbite. The chamber erupts in murmurs, gasps colliding with low growls of disapproval. Reporters scribble furiously, cameras zoom to capture Geets's smirk faltering into a nervous twitch. The immigrant mother wipes her tears, keeps her eyes fixed on Jasmine, lips parting as though silently thanking her. The veteran shifts, his fist tightening, until the leather of his chair creaks beneath the strain. And then, as if the walls themselves had ears, the ripple extends outward. Screens in living rooms flash hashtags, feeds explode with commentary. And 3 words rise above the nose like a rallying cry. Hashtag due process today. The effect is electric. On the line, clips of Jasmine's rebuttal slice through social media timelines like lightning, stitched and remixed within minutes. One commentator tweets, "She just dismantled the word common sense in front of the nation." Another posts side-by-side images, a guardsman sweeping trash in DC and a crying child in Chicago, captioned, "Whose America is this?" The hashtags multiply. Hashtag common sense or cruelty. Hashtag fear is not safety. Hashtag Crockett vs. Vance. The hearing is no longer confined to the marble chamber. It has spilled into phones, into living rooms, into the bloodstream of a restless nation. Geets tries to speak again, but the nose drowns him out. Audience whispers rising into a rumble, the scrape of chairs, the hiss of indignation. He looks to Vance for backup, but Vance remains rigid, lips pressed thin, the weight of silence heavier than any defense. Jasmine lets the moment hang, her eyes never leaving Geets, letting him squirm under the realization that his attempt at disruption has backfired spectacularly. Her voice returns, quiet but merciless. "If this is the best you can offer, mocking truth, silencing pain, weaponizing fear, then your so-called common sense is nothing more than barbarism in a cheap suit." The room stills, every ear straining to catch the last word. How would you define common sense justice? By the nose of politicians, or by the lives shattered in their silence? Jasmine does not waste the surge of momentum left in the room after Geets's collapse. She flips another page of her binder, the sharp crack of the paper cutting through the whispers, then leans forward, eyes locked on Vance like a hawk pinning its prey. Her words are stripped of decoration, stripped of preamble, fired point blank for the cameras and the nation. Who signed these raids? The question slices the air, hanging there like a blade suspended above his head. For a moment, Vance seems ready to answer. His lips part, his throat bobs, but nothing comes out. He swallows, hard, the motion caught in merciless high definition. The smirk he wore minutes ago is gone, replaced by a stiffness in his jaw, as though he's chewing on gravel. The silence deepens, presses into the walls, every tick of the clock hammering louder than any gavel. 10 seconds, 15. The sound of shuffling papers dies. The reporters stop writing. The only sound is the low hum of cameras and the faint rustle of a flag in the corner. The Iraq veteran grips the rail in front of him, knuckles bleaching, veins coiling like rope under his skin. He leans forward slightly, chest rising in measured rage, jaw clenched so tight it looks as though his teeth might crack. Under his breath comes a low growl, not quite words, but enough for those nearest to feel the weight of war behind it. The Chicago police chief shakes his head, lips pressed tight, a muttered "damn shame" slitting out before he can stop himself. His voice is low, but in the quiet it carries like thunder. 20, 30, 40. The air thickens until it feels combustible. Audience members shift in their seats, whispers swelling like a current beneath the silence, each second adding fuel. Some glance at the exit doors as if expecting the building itself to erupt, others stare fixedly at Vance as if sheer willpower might wring an answer out of him. A woman gasps softly when he reaches for his water glass, hand trembling almost imperceptibly. By the 50-second mark, The silence is no longer hesitation, it is exposure. Reporters glance at one another, eyebrows raised, knowing they are witnessing not just a pause, but a fracture. Keats leans in, trying to telegraph reassurance, but Vance avoids his gaze, eyes darting instead to the cameras, to the public he cannot deceive in real time. The gavel does not come. No one rescues him. The clock rolls to 57 seconds, and the stillness detonates with more force than any outburst. Jasmine leans back, victory radiating in her composure. Her voice, calm and precise, drops into the void his silence has left. So the raids had no name, no author, no chain of command. Power without accountability is not leadership, it's lawlessness, with a flag draped over it. The chamber stiffens, breath caught in every throat, the tension snapping tight as wire. When leaders stay silent, what do you hear louder, their fear or their guilt? Vance straightens in his chair, seizing the moment to claw back control, his voice amplified not just by the microphone, but by the hunger to reassert dominance. We must treat drug gangs like foreign enemies, he declares, each syllable hammered with the cadence of a general briefing his troops. This is a war, and wars are not fought with subpoenas or plea deals. Wars are won by elimination. The word elimination lands with the coldness of a verdict, reverberating through the chamber like the clang of iron gates. He leans back as though the line itself should crown him, the air thick with his certainty. But Jasmine is already in motion, her binder opening like a wound that refuses to stay closed. She pulls a file from within, its cover stamped with a seal that makes even the reporters lean forward, and holds it aloft. The projector flickers, and then the chamber is assaulted with images. First, the blackened hull of a freighter drifting off a foreign coast, riddled with bullet holes, smoke still trailing upward like a prayer never answered. Then, the stark rows of body bags laid out on a pier, the camera lingering on the outline of human forms beneath the plastic. 11 of them, 11 civilians, fishermen, and deckhands flattened into anonymous shapes. The silence in the room shifts from tense to horrify, as though the temperature has dropped 10 degrees in an instant. The veteran lowers his head, eyes wet with recognition of the cost when war is misnamed. The immigrant mother clutches her folder tighter, whispering something to herself in Spanish that trembles like a plea. Even the Chicago police chief, hardened by crime scenes, rubs the back of his neck, as though trying to scrub the image from his mind. The audience murmurs, the nose swelling, reporters scribbling like their pens can't keep up with the gravity of the revelation. Jasmine does not raise her voice. Instead, she steps into the microphone with a whisper that carries sharper than any shout. The dead cannot appeal. The words land like frostbite, sinking deep, stripping the room of oxygen. She lets the images linger on the screen. 11 silent witnesses who cannot testify, who cannot cross-examine, who cannot stand trial. Her eyes do not leave Vance, and his smirk has long since dissolved into something closer to stone. She leans in further, voice trembling with controlled fury. If this is your definition of strength, then America has traded justice for a firing squad. If this is your war, then every citizen is one raid away from becoming collateral. Her gaze sweeps across the chamber, past the cameras, into the millions of living rooms watching, her voice rising now to slice through the suffocating hush. Wars are fought abroad, justice is fought at home. Do not confuse the two, unless your goal is to bring the battlefield into every American neighborhood. The audience breaks into gasps and low murmurs again, the air charged, the tension unbearable yet irresistible. Should the government act like an army against its own citizens, or is that the day democracy dies? The images of body bags still burn across the screen when a chair scrapes suddenly against the marble floor. The sound is sharp, jarring, like a rifle crack, and every head turns. The Iraq veteran, silent until now, pushes himself up with hands that tremble but refuse to stay still. His chest rises as though dragging air through a battlefield haze, his voice low at first, but carried by something deeper than volume. We fought wars, he begins, and the chamber stills, with rules of engagement to protect civilians. We carried those rules into hell, into ambushes, into streets where we didn't know who was enemy and who was neighbor. We risked our lives not just to fight, but to fight with honor. And now you want to abandon those rules here, at home. The words pierce harder than any data point, because they come blood-soaked, born of memory. His hand trembles as he grips the rail, knuckles bleached white, but his voice grows steadier with each syllable. I buried friends who died holding those rules. who wouldn't pull the trigger unless they knew. They paid with their lives because they believed America stood for more than fear. Don't you dare tell me now that fear is the new standard. His eyes, rimmed red, lock on Vance with the unflinching force of a soldier who has seen power lie before. The chamber falls into a reverent hush, no coughs, no whispers, only the weight of his truth pressed against every ear. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, lingering longer than usual, capturing the sweat at his temple, the scar cutting across his jaw, to trembling breath between words. Geets shifts in his seat, uneasy, suddenly small. The immigrant mother presses her hands to her lips, whispering prayers not just for herself but for the soldier's burden. Reporters freeze their pens, aware that one misplaced word could fracture the gravity of the moment. Vance sits rigid, but his eyes falter, betraying something he cannot disguise, the recognition that this man's truth is stronger than his script. Jasmine leans forward, her gaze never leaving the veteran. Her voice softens, stripped of performance, carrying only solidarity. Justice, she says, is the highest form of honor. We don't dishonor the dead by abandoning the principles they carried into battle. We dishonor them when we drag those principles through the mud of politics and call it victory. She turns toward the cameras, eyes blazing now. When a soldier tells us that even in war we guarded the innocent, how dare a politician demand less for our own people? The room exhales as though it has been holding its breath for too long. The veteran lowers himself back into his chair, shoulders shaking, but the silence that follows is no longer suffocating, it is sacred. Jasmine lets the moment stretch, lets the truth echo longer than any soundbite, then strikes with her final blow. Between the man who fought under fire to protect the innocent and the man who sells fear to destroy them, whose testimony do you trust more, a politician or a soldier? The veteran's words still hang like smoke when Jasmine flits to the final tab in her binder, the room bracing as though it knows what's coming. She rises slowly, every movement deliberate, as if carrying something heavier than paper, something sacred. The cameras pan in close, she places one hand on the desk and the other on the document. Her voice drops into a measured cadence, not fiery now, but solemn, each word pulled directly from the Constitution itself. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The phrase cuts sharper than any accusation, because it is not hers, it is America's. The chamber freezes, the immigrant mother presses her son's crane, drawing closer to her chest. The veteran bows his head, lips moving silently as though repeating the clause like a prayer. The police chief exhales through clenched teeth, his fingers tapping once against the table, the reflex of a man who knows exactly what those words mean when ignored on the street. The reporters stop writing entirely, their pens hovering above paper, because history does not need paraphrasing when it is spoken word for word. Jasmine lifts her eyes and aims them directly at J.D. Vance. The silence is immediate, heavy, total. He opens his mouth, but no words emerge. He shifts in his chair, blinking rapidly, his hands twitching as though they might find refuge in motion, but none comes. The cameras zoom closer, catching the flicker of sweat at his hairline, the subtle quiver in his jaw. Seconds begin to stack, 10, 15, 20. The gallery instinctively begins to count, lips moving without sound, the shared ritual of marking time in the presence of collapse. The sound design of the moment is cruel in its simplicity, a single heartbeat, amplify, echoing through the chamber like a war drum. 30 seconds, 40. The heartbeat grows louder in imagination if not in fact, pounding in every chest, sensing strangers into one collective pulse. 50. Vance glances sideways toward Geets, but Geets does not move, his smirk has evaporated. 55. Jasmine does not look away, her eyes steady as stone, her silence louder than his paralysis. 60. 61. And then an audible gasp, sharp and involuntary, breaks from the gallery, a crack in the dam of tension, releasing disbelief and all at once. Jasmine lets the silence linger a beat longer before leaning into the mic, her voice low, steady, lethal in its calm. That silence, Mr. Vance, is the sound of power when stripped of its mask. The Constitution does not stutter, justice does not choke. Only fear does. Her words ripple outward, slicing through the chamber, transmitted across airwaves into millions of homes. She closes the binder with a decisive snap, the punctuation mark to a minute that has already entered political folklore. What goes through your mind in a minute of silence from power? The echo of fear, or the confession of guilt. The chamber is still vibrating from the 61 seconds of silence when Jasmine's team cues the next lie. The images shift from the stark body bags appear to the golden glow of a restaurant in downtown DC. Joe's Seafood, marble line, chandeliers dripping with light. The camera pans across polished tables groaning under platters of lobster tails, towers of oysters, champagne flutes rising in mock celebration. At the center of it all, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and a cluster of cabinet loyalists, laughing mid-toast, faces flushed with the indulgence of victory. The contrast is unbearable, obscene even, and the gasp from the gallery, sharper than any line of testimony. The narration rolls over the images like thunder. While families in Chicago were torn apart by midnight raids, while children screamed as fathers were dragged away, the men who ordered it all celebrated with shellfish and wine. The camera zooms on Vance's face in the photo, a fork hovering over lobster meat, his smile stretched wide. On the opposite screen, the immigrant mother's testimony replays for just 3 seconds, her child's desperate cry layered over the image of Vance's laughter. The juxtaposition lands like a blade. Jasmine rises again, voice rising not with anger but with incredulity sharpened into contempt. "Who eats lobster?" she demands, stabbing the words into the air. "While mothers lose children? Who drinks champagne while fathers are hauled away in chains? Who raises a glass to decisive leadership while 11 innocents lie zipped in body bags halfway across the world?" Her voice breaks into a crescendo, carried by outrage so palpable it makes the lights overhead seem to tremble. She leans forward, daring Vance to deny it, her eyes sweeping the cameras, delivering her fury not just to the chamber but to every living room, every phone screen across the nation. The crowd ripples with shock, anger spilling into murmurs that feel like the first waves of a riot. Reporters type furiously, headlines already writing themselves: Crockett, lobster and lies. Social media ignites hashtags, bloom in real time, feeds flooded with side-by-side photos of seafood towers and crying children. Hashtag lobsterwalethi climbs within minutes, joined by hashtag justice not champagne. The chamber is no longer a sealed room, it is a broadcast battlefield, and Jasmine knows it. Then shifts in his seat, his eyes flashing toward Geets, who now stares down at his phone, scrolling frantically as if searching for a defense in the torrent of outrage already surging online. Trump's defenders on the panel look away, some fidgeting, others stone-faced, but none daring to interrupt. The silence from their side is deafening this time, not because they are cornered, but because they know nothing they say can wash away the stain of laughter echoing against grief. Jasmine lowers her voice again, letting the fury condense into something quieter, sharper. This is not strength. This is not leadership. This is decadence draped in patriotism, feasting while America's wounds bleed. She lets the image linger on screen a moment longer, the grotesque banquet illuminated like evidence at a crime scene, before snapping her binder shut. What offends you more, corruption or indifference? The images of lobster towers still glow faintly on the screen when the hearing takes a darker turn. Reporters whisper among themselves, flipping through freshly printed copies of a document leaked just hours earlier. A letter, dated 2003, dripping with tawdry innuendo, allegedly signed by Donald Trump and addressed to Jeffrey Epstein. A birthday greeting, obscene in tone, obscene in implication. The press gallery stirs, waiting for the moment someone will force the issue. All eyes tilt toward Matt Gaetz, Trump's most eager defender, the man who has never met a provocation he wouldn't amplify. But Gaetz, so quick with interruptions, so reckless with outbursts, sits strangely subdued. He leans back in his chair, lips pressed thin, scrolling his phone with unusual concentration. He does not raise the letter, he does not speak. He looks, for the first time, afraid. The hesitation is blood in the water, and Jasmine Crockett smells it instantly. She tilts her head, eyes narrowing, letting the silence draw attention to the cowardice in the room. Then she strikes. "Why ignore?" she demands, her voice a whip crack, "the shadow that looms over your power." The words slam into the chamber with such force that the air itself seems to recoil. She slams a copy of the letter onto the desk, the echo bouncing like a gunshot. This letter, whether authentic or forged, circulates in the bloodstream of public doubt, and yet not one of you dares address it. Not one of you dares speak the name that links your so-called leadership to one of the darkest scandals in American memory. The audience gasps as the paper is projected onto the screen, blown up in enormous font, the alleged signature sprawling across the bottom. Reporters lean forward, phone snapping, pen scribbling as though they can't keep up. The immigrant mother buries her face in her hands, not out of shame but exhaustion at the rot that seems to drip from the highest office. The veteran's jaw flexes, he mutters under his breath, "Cowards." The police chief shakes his head, muttering to no one in particular, "This is what's running the country." The murmur grows into a wave, cresting, threatening to drown the chamber in disbelief. Vance shifts uncomfortably, his posture no longer rigid but defensive. He reaches for his microphone, then stops, his lips pressing together so tightly they blanch. Keats glances at him, panic flaring in his eyes, as though pleading for Jasmine's attack to pass, for the cameras to blink away from the shadow crawling over the administration. But Jasmine does not let go. She paces her words like blows, her cadence rising. If this letter is false, say it under oath. If it is true, answer for it under law. But do not sit in silence while Americans choke on doubt. Tower that hides from questions does not deserve trust, it deserves exile. The gallery erupts, some with applause, others with shouts, but all with the recognition that a veil has been torn. Social media flashes alive. Screenshots of the letter, Jasmine's words subtitled in bold, hashtags bowling to the top of trending lists, hashtag shadow of Epstein, hashtag Ganser or resign. The narrative has shifted. The hearing is no longer just about raids and fear, but about the rot at the heart of the empire. Jasmine turns back toward the camera, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Do leaders earn trust by answering questions or by dodging them? The echo of the Epstein letter still ripples through the chamber when Jasmine lowers her binder and fixes her gaze squarely on Vance. Her voice is no longer fiery but cold, precise, the kind of calm that rattles more than shouting ever could. Unchecked power is not strength, it is rot, she declares, letting each word land like a gavel strike. The silence that follows is jagged, the kind that forces even those who disagree to feel the weight of truth pressing against their ribs. She doesn't blink, doesn't soften, she lets the sentence hang in the air like a noose. The constitutional lawyer seated behind her leans into his mic, seizing the opening. His tone is measured but grim, the cadence of a surgeon delivering a fatal diagnosis. Executive policing without oversight, without boundaries is not a tool of democracy. It is an authoritarian sly. Today it is immigrants in Chicago. Tomorrow it is protesters in Detroit. And the day after, it could be anyone who dares to stand in opposition. Power without chains does not defend liberty, it strangles it. The lawyer's words, though softly spoken, strike with the inevitability of prophecy. The reporters in the gallery bend forward as though gravity itself has shifted, their pens scratching faster, their faces pale. The audience shifts uneasily, the murmurs swelling like an approaching storm. The immigrant mother grips her son's drawing tighter, her knuckles white against the paper. The veteran's eyes close, the scar on his jaw tightening as memories surface, memories of watching foreign leaders claim they were restoring order while sowing chaos. The police chief exhales sharply, muttering, "That's not policing, that's command." His words carry, raw and unfiltered, the voice of a man who knows firsthand what happens when political orders reach the pavement. Cameras zoom in on Vance, but his composure is cracking. His jaw works furiously, his hands flex on the table as though searching for control, yet every twitch betrays that the ground beneath him is shifting. Jasmine presses harder, her voice rising in pitch but not in volume, like a blade being drawn closer to skin. You tell America this is strength, but rot dressed in armor, still rot. Fear wrapped in a flag is still fear. You are not protecting this nation, you are corroding it from within. The chamber is a live war now, energy sparking off marble walls. On the line, the hashtags explode again. Hashtag rot in power climbing to the top of trending lists. Commentators post side-by-side clips of Jasmine's line, and check power is not strength. It is wrought against images of authoritarian regimes across history. The tension is unbearable yet magnetic, the kind of spectacle that glues millions to their screens, unable to look away. Jasmine leans forward, voice steady but resonant, a final cut into the silence. The question before us is not whether America will wield power. The question is whether that power will be chained by law or unchained by ambition. And unchained power has only one destination: tyranny. She lets the word detonate, then lowers her gaze deliberately, as if daring anyone to deny it. How would you chain power without strangling liberty? The chamber is already trembling under Jasmine's last strike when Vance stiffens and thrusts himself back into the spotlight. He grips the mic like a weapon, his voice booming with the cadence of a rally, every word hammered into a slogan. Americans want clean streets, he thunders, pounding the table once for effect. The phrase reverberates off the marble walls, simple, sharp, designed to bypass thought and ignite instinct. Cameras zoom in close, catching the nods of his allies, the faint stir of approval from a few in the gallery who cling to the illusion that safety can be boiled down to 3 words. For a moment, the air feels as though he has regained the upper hand, his chant threatening to drown out the evidence and the silence that have boxed him in all day. But Jasmine does not flinch. She rises slowly, deliberately, as though uncoiling from a spring wound tight with fury. The pause stretches just long enough for viewers at home to lean forward, breath held, knowing something is about to break. Her voice emerges not in a roar but in a blade-sharp whisper, slicing through the chamber. Clean, she repeats, letting the word drip with scorn, doesn't mean clean of people. Clean means clean of fear. The line detonates like dynamite. The audience erupts, the release volcanic, thunder rolling through applause, gasps, even shouts. For the first time, it is not murmurs or whispers but a roar raw, unfiltered, unstoppable. The immigrant mother sobs openly, clutching her child's drawing to her chest as if Jasmine has just given her son's woes back. The veteran slams his palm against the rail, his eyes blazing with something closer to pride than pain. The police chief exhales hard, a half-smile breaking against his fatigue, muttering, "That's the truth right there." Even the reporters, bound by duty to stay detached, look at one another with widened eyes, their pens racing, already composing headlines that will dominate the cycle. Crockett redefines clean. Vance tries to interject, his mouth twitching into another slogan, but the sound is drowned out by the weight of the crowd's reaction. Hashtags burst alive across social media, like fireworks. Hashtag clean of fear. Hashtag justice not slogans. Hashtag Crockett vs Vance. Clips of Jasmine's words are cut, looped, and shared before her microphone has even cooled, each replaying the moment she shattered his catchphrase with a truth that feels undeniable. Millions watching at home feel the hairs on their arms rise, the kind of electric recognition that something bigger than politics has just been said. Jasmine doesn't bask in the applause, she sharpens it. She leans forward again, her voice stronger now, riding the wave she's unleashed. You wave slogans like shields because you're afraid of questions. But America doesn't need shields, it needs honesty. And if your definition of clean means sweeping away people instead of fear, then you are not protecting this nation. You are scrubbing out its soul. The words cut deeper than any statistic, each syllable heavy with conviction, impossible to ignore. What does clean mean to you, streets swept of people, or a country swept of fear by justice? The applause still rumbles through the marble chamber when Vance lunges for the microphone, his face hardening, jaw clenched. He has lost ground, and he knows it, but desperation sharpens his tongue. "You're weak," he spits, his voice low but venomous, each syllable aimed like a dart at Jasmine. The word echoes, hanging in the air, not as an argument but as an insult, a sneer dressed as certainty. He leans forward, eyes narrowed, daring her to falter, daring her to shrink before the cameras that magnify every flinch. But Jasmine doesn't flinch. She rises with the kind of precision that feels rehearsed by life itself, not politics. Her eyes burn with fury, but her voice emerges controlled, resonant, carrying the weight of something deeper than anger. "Weak," she says slowly, savoring the word as though to dissect it, "is shooting shadows and calling yourself a hero." The gallery stiffens, the insult reflected back at Vance like a mirror he cannot escape. She leans closer, her voice sharpening to a blade's edge. "Strong is upholding law when blood boils. Strong is standing in the fire of fear and still choosing justice over vengeance." The words ignite the chamber like a struck match in a room filled with gas. The audience erupts, not murmurs this time, but an explosion. Applause thunders, gasps cut through the roar, and the immigrant mother rises halfway from her seat, tears streaking down her face as she clutches her child's drawing aloft like a banner. The veteran slams his fist against the rail, his voice cracking as he shouts, "That's strength." The police chief nods firmly, lips pressed tight, but eyes betraying the relief of hearing what he has always known but rarely heard spoken aloud in the halls of power. Vance's face flushes crimson, the smirk gone, his composure unraveling. He leans back in his chair, muttering under his breath, hands tightening into fists he doesn't dare raise. Cameras zoom close on his discomfort, capturing every twitch, every bead of sweat, broadcasting it live to millions. Online, clips of Jasmine's words detonate across feeds, weak as shooting shadows. Strong as upholding law, the hashtags shift instantly, surging upward. Hashtag true strength. Hashtag weakness exposed. Hashtag Crockett vs Vance. Her rebuttal becomes a rallying cry in real time, replayed, remixed, emblazoned across timelines. Jasmine holds the silence after the eruption, her gaze sweeping across the chamber, letting her words settle like iron into the bones of everyone listening. When she speaks again, her tone softens, but the steel remains. If defending the powerless makes me weak, then I will carry that weakness proudly. Because what you call weakness, history will call courage. She leans back, her eyes never leaving Vance, the silence that follows not empty but filled with a truth that no insult can erase. Is restrained weakness, or is it the truest form of strength? The chamber, still shaking from Jasmine's dismantling of Vance, when Geets decides he can no longer stay silent. He leans forward, hair slick, eyes darting toward the cameras as though the nation itself is his audience. His voice is theatrical, rising with mock bravado. The American people are tired of lectures, he sneers, stabbing the air with his finger. They want action. They want leaders who aren't afraid to take the gloves off. This is not weakness, it's survival, and Congresswoman Crockett is mistaking compassion for cowardice. He smirks, clearly expecting the line to land like a knockout punch, already imagining it clipped and replayed across sympathetic networks. But Jasmine turns to him with a gaze that could burn through stone. She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't need to. Her words are delivered with surgical precision, each one aimed like a scalpel. No, Congressman, she says, the syllables deliberate, almost cold. You don't sell survival, you sell spectacle. You cast fear like a TV show, dressed in slogans and sound bites, hoping Americans mistake theater for truth. The chamber jolts as though struck by lightning. The smirk evaporates from Geets's face in real time, his eyes widening before he masks them with a shaky laugh. But the damage is already done. Gasps ripple through the audience, followed by applause that bursts, without restraint. The immigrant mother lifts her chin, whispering gracias under her breath. The veteran shakes his head, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Even the police chief exhales audibly, muttering to his aide. Finally someone said it. Reporters scramble to capture the moment, typing furiously, phones vibrating as headlines begin to form mid-sentence. Crockett, fear as theater. Then comes the explosion online. Within minutes, the clip circulates across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The quote flashes, in bold text over split-screen edits, Geets waving his finger juxtaposed against guardsmen sweeping trash, children crying, body bags lined in rows. Hashtag Ferris Theater rockets to trending within 20 minutes, joined by hashtag Crockett vs Geets and hashtag Truth over Spectacle. Commentators dissect it live. She just ended Geets's career in under 10 words. Others remix the moment into memes, Jasmine's voice layered over footage of stage curtains dropping, Geets frozen mid-gesture. The chamber has transformed into a stage of its own. And Jasmine has just seized the role of director. Geets, red-faced, sputters, as though reaching for another lie, but every attempt dies in his throat, strangled by the thunder of applause and the glare of cameras capturing his humiliation. Jasmine holds her posture, calm, unyielding, letting the uproar crest and settle. She leans toward the mic once more, her tone low but lethal. This is not a season finale, Congressman. This is the future of a nation. And the people of this country deserve leaders, not performers auditioning for the next headline. The chamber falls into a stunned hush, the weight of her words pressing down on every corner. For the first time, Geets has no smirk, no comeback, only silence. Do you see politics today as governance or theater? Outside the marble dome, the city is no longer quiet. What began as scattered chants at the barricades has swelled into a storm. Thousands press against the fencing, their voices layered into a wall of sound that rattles a very glass of the Capitol. Handmade signs rise like waves clean of fear, not of people. Justice over theater, due process today. The chant is relentless, deafening, as though the pulse of the nation has migrated to these steps. Helicopters circle above, their blades chopping the sky, while police sirens whine from every direction, unable to drown the roar of human outrage. On the news networks, anchors sit in split screens, Jasmine's fiery words replaying in loops. Weak is shooting shadows and calling yourself a hero, thunders one clip. Another shows her whisper, icy and unforgettable, the dead cannot appeal. Hashtag scroll in real time across the ticker. Hashtag fear is theater. Hashtag rot in power. Hashtag clean of fear. By the minute, the crowd outside grows larger, fed by buses arriving from Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York. Protesters live stream, their phones shaking as they chant, Crockett. Crockett, justice now. The capital, once a fortress of detachment, is under siege not by violence, but by the sheer weight of witness. Inside, the pressure is palpable. The chants leak through the walls, faint but steady, a drumbeat behind every question, every pause. Staffers glance nervously at their phones, screens glowing with feeds of the swelling crowd. Senators whisper among themselves, some frowning, others visibly rattled, their confidence fraying with every headline flashing across their aides' tablets. Reporters in the gallery type furiously, capturing not just the words inside but the fury outside, aware that the story is no longer confined to the chamber but unfolding simultaneously in the streets. Jasmine senses it, feels the tremor beneath the floorboards. She allows herself a glance toward the windows where faint vibrations hum through the glass. The people have arrived not as statistics, not as distant viewers, but as a presence pressing its weight against the institution itself. Her spine straightens, not just from her own conviction, but from the energy surging outside. She knows she is not alone, not today. Every phrase she has uttered now ricochets between marble and asphalt, chamber and street, amplified into something larger than politics, a reckoning. Vance, by contrast, shifts uneasily. He presses his palms against the table, trying to project calm, but his eyes betray a flicker of unease. He can hear it too, the chants, the pounding rhythm of a nation that will not be pacified by slogans. For the first time, his voice wavers as he attempts to speak, drowned not by Jasmine but by the echo of thousands outside demanding answers. The camera catches the twitch in his jaw, the bead of sweat that betrays the recognition that his tower is shrinking in real time. The chamber shakes not from architecture, but from pressure the kind no gavel can silence, no speech can smother. Jasmine rises once more, her voice rising to meet the rhythm outside. You hear them, don't you, the people? Their voices bleed through these walls because they cannot be shut out. Tower belongs to them, not to the few who feast while others weep. Her hand slams the desk, the crack echoing like a cannon shot. Does change come from inside the chamber or from the streets pounding at its doors? The chants outside rattle the chamber windows like a drumbeat of truth, and Jasmine seizes the moment. She leans into the mic, her gaze drilling through Vance with unflinching fire. Her words strike with the finality of a verdict. You don't want justice, you want executioners. The sentence slices the air clean in two, and the entire room jerks as if hit by a sudden crack of thunder. Vance stiffens, caught between defiance and collapse. His jaw works furiously, but no rebuttal comes. The camera zooms tight, capturing the twitch in his cheek, the quick swallow that betrays fear. For the first time in hours, the veneer of toughness he has worn like armor begins to splinter. He grips the table, knuckles white, yet his posture screams retreat. The smirk is gone. The slogans are gone. What remains is a man rattled, cornered, exposed beneath the glare of a nation's eyes. The gallery holds its breath, the silence inside colliding with the roar outside. The immigrant mother stares at him through tears, her child's drawing clutched to her chest like evidence of innocence itself. The veteran leans forward, his scarred hand trembling but his eyes steady, nodding toward Jasmine as if to say, yes, that's the fight we swore to protect. The police chief mutters low enough for only those near him to hear. She's saying what we've all wanted to shout. Jasmine stands taller, her voice deepening, her cadence now less about rhetoric and more about embodiment. She no longer sounds like a politician, she sounds like a conscience given flesh. This is not about power. This is about a promise that every American life deserves dignity, not a death sentence by decree. If you trade judges for executioners, if you replace law with fear, then you are not defending America, you are dismantling it. Her words thunder against the marble walls, but it's her steady tone, not the volume, that makes them shake. The crowd outside crescendos, their chants fusing with her words, echoing back through the chamber like an army of voices rising to her defense. The spectacle becomes symphony, one woman inside, thousands outside, and millions watching from screens, all bound together by a truth too heavy to silence. Vance averts his gaze, his eyes dropping to the desk, because to meet hers would be to admit defeat. What scares power more, the truth spoken without fear, or the people united to demand it? The chamber vibrates with the echoes of Jasmine's last strike, the crowd outside pounding their chant like thunder rolling across the city. She doesn't sit, she doesn't retreat, she takes one long breath and steadies herself, eyes sweeping across the panel, across the cameras, across the very walls, as if she were speaking not to men but to history. Her voice is steady, deliberate, but carrying the urgency of a final warning. This is not about left or right. This is not about party lines or election cycles. This is about freedom versus fear. And fear is winning every time you tell America that safety comes only through submission. Her words wrapped the room in a new kind of silence, not paralysis this time, but reckoning. The veteran rises from his chair slowly, shoulders trembling from the weight he has carried for years. He extends his hand across the barrier, and Jasmine meets it with both of hers, gripping tightly. The cameras flash, capturing the moment. A soldier who once fought for a promise abroad now shaking the hand of a woman fighting to protect it at home. His voice cracks, but it carries clear enough for all to hear. This is the America I bled for. The gallery breaks into applause that no gavel could suppress. The immigrant mother begins to sob, but her tears are not the hollow tears of despair, they are tears of release. She presses her child's drawing against her chest, shaking her head in disbelief, whispering gracias, gracias through trembling lips. The camera lingers on her, then cuts to Jasmine, and for the first time in hours, the hearing feels less like a battlefield and more like a crossroad where mercy and law intersect. Reporters scramble, headlines taking shape. Crockett, freedom versus fear. Keats sits motionless, head lowered, his usual smirk buried beneath the weight of a moment he cannot spin. His hands twitch, restless, but he doesn't lift his eyes. The lights above cast shadows across his face, as though the spotlight itself has rejected him. Vance stares blankly at his notes, lips pressed thin, shoulders hunched, no slogan left to salvage him. The chamber has shifted, not in nose, but in gravity, the power of the moment pulling inexorably toward Jasmine. She straightens her shoulders, turning now toward the cameras that carry her words into every home. The question before us is not whether America will survive, she says, her tone rising into a crescendo. It is which America will survive. Will it be the America of fear where children cry in the night, where silence is sold as strength, where power feasts while families starve? Or will it be the America of freedom where law is our shield, where truth is our weapon, where justice is not bargained away for the illusion of order? Her hand slams against the desk, the sound reverberating like a drumbeat for a march not yet begun. The crowd outside roars as if answering her, their chant folding into her words until the chamber feels like it is shaking with one singular voice. Jasmine holds her gaze on the lens, her eyes unwavering, her voice dropping into something softer but sharper than a blade. Which America will you choose, fearful or free? Vance knows he is cornered, but desperation drives him to try one last strike. He leans forward, eyes flashing, voice rising into a bark meant to reclaim command. Your speeches won't stop crime, Congresswoman. Your compassion will bury this country. We need force, we need fear, we need control because weakness is how nations fall. The words rattle out of him like shrapnel, raw, frantic, stripped of the polish he once wore. Cameras lock in, catching the tremor at the edge of his lips, the fire of a man no longer confident but clawing for survival. Jasmine waits. She doesn't rush, doesn't interrupt. She lets him burn through his final script until silence falls, heavy and spent. Then she rises, slow and deliberate, her figure framed against the glaring lights, every eye fixed on her. Her voice cuts through the chamber with surgical clarity. You don't want safety, you don't want law, you want a stage to play general in a war theater. She pauses, the weight of the words dropping like a stone in still water. Then, steady and resolute, she delivers the final blow. I don't want a war theater. I want a justice republic. The chamber detonates. Gasps collide with applause, reporters scramble, the audience surges with a force that rattles the marble walls. Outside, the chants crashed, merging with the roar inside, until the Capitol itself feels alive with defiance. The gavel slams again and again, desperate to restore order, but order no longer belongs to the chair, it belongs to the truth that has just been spoken. Jasmine stands tall, eyes locked on Vance, her presence towering not just over him but over the moment itself. When power is cornered, what mask falls away, the mask of strength or the mask of fear? The gavel still echoes inside when the sound outside overtakes everything. Chants roar like surf against the steps of the Capitol, thousands of voices thundering in unison. Justice, not fear. Justice, not fear. Signs sway above the crowd, cardboard and ink turned into weapons sharper than steel. Clean of fear, not of people. Truth is strength. Crockett for justice. Camera cranes sweep across the sea of faces, catching tears, clenched fists, and children hoisted on shoulders chanting words they barely understand but will never forget. The streets are no longer an audience, they are the stage. A narrator's voice weaves through the images, solemn but charged. America has been here before, crossroads, where fear threatened to choke liberty, where power mistook silence for consent. But again and again, the people rose, from Selma to Standing Rock, from marches against kings abroad to marches against injustice at home. Resilience has been the spine of this republic. The words lay over the footage like a heartbeat, steady and defiant. The doors of the Capitol swing open and Jasmine steps into the roar. She doesn't wave, doesn't grandstand. She walks into the crowd and extends her hand. A janitor, still in uniform from cleaning the very halls where leaders bicker, grasps it with tears in his eyes. A nurse, scrub stained from the night shift, clasps it tight, whispering, "Thank you for seeing us." A veteran, medals gleaming against his faded jacket, salutes, and Jasmine grips his shoulder firmly, returning the honor. The cameras drink in every moment, each handshake a covenant, each touch a reminder that democracy lives not in marble chambers, but in the hands of its people. The chants swell louder, echoing against the dome, reverberating across the nation through every broadcast. Jasmine stands among them, not above them, her presence less leader than conduit of their defiance. Hope rises not from speeches, but from the undeniable proof that the people themselves are speaking. Whose voice matters more, the powerful few inside, or the people in the streets who refuse to be silenced? The chants outside still thunder when Jasmine returns to the microphone for the last time. She doesn't raise her hand for silence, she lets the roar carry, lets it bleed into the chamber, a reminder that the people are not a backdrop but the heartbeat of the moment. Her voice cuts through, steady, unflinching, carrying the weight of everything said and everything left unsaid. Security doesn't oppose justice, she declares, her tone sharp enough to etch the words into stone. It stands on its shoulders. Without justice, security is a cage. With justice, security is freedom. Choose not fear, but freedom. The words crash into the chamber like a wave, flooding over allies, opponents, and the millions watching beyond. The cameras capture her stillness after, her hands resting on the binder that has become both shield and sword. Then the sound design shifts, subtle, chilling. A heartbeat begins, faint at first, then louder, filling the silence with the echo of human fragility. Boom, 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 each beat a reminder of what is at stake, of lives beyond policy, of the blood that runs through those caught in the machinery of power. And then, as the crowd holds its breath, the heartbeat stops. A silence so sharp it feels like the edge of a blade slices through the air. For a beat, nothing. Then the chamber erupts into applause, furious, defiant, cathartic, rolling like thunder across marble and into the night. The narrator's voice overlays the eruption, calm but searing. A warrior is not defined by the enemies they defeat, but by the lives they defend. History will not remember silence. It will remember those who stood. The screen fades to black, leaving only Jasmine's words lingering. Luminous, impossible to ignore. Which side of history will you stand on? Comment now. In the end, Jasmine's fight reminds us that true strength is not found in fear or control, but in courage, compassion, and the defense of human dignity. Justice is not a luxury, it is the foundation of real security, and it lives only when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. In our own lives, we face crossroads every day. Moments where we can look away, or moments where we can stand up for what is right, even when it's difficult. The question is simple yet powerful. When fear tries to dictate the terms, will you choose silence or will you choose freedom? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.